Greetings. I am Dorothy Dowling, a principal of DEI Advisors. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to personal empowerment. I am delighted to welcome Hannah Greenberg, CEO of 11 Software. Hannah, it is such an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, Dorothy.
Wonderful. Well, Hannah, one of the areas that people are always most interested is really understanding individuals' career journeys. And you've had an amazing one from my point of view in terms of your journey through private equity. And now you're leading a major technology company that serves the hospitality industry. I'm hoping you can share that journey with us and how you move through those various chapters of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I start on the actual career, I would say that I was an entrepreneur from like a very young age. I was 10 when I started my first business, which was a neighborhood gift wrapping business. So I would collect all of the neighborhood gifts over the holidays, during December, and I would wrap them all for, $5 or $10 per gift. And some years I'd make almost $5,000, which is a lot of money. I also learned in that time that you have to pay back the cost of goods. So I'd have to pay my parents back for fronting me the wrapping paper. But nonetheless, I believe I was an entrepreneur pretty early on. From there, I have spent my whole career in the hospitality industry in some way or another. I started going to the hotel school at Cornell. And I think my passion for hospitality started also at a young age. I was traveling a lot with my mom. She would take me on work trips, and I learned things like room service. And I thought it was the coolest thing to be a hotel general manager. Like, that was my dream. And so I went to the hotel school at Cornell thinking I was going to live in operations. It was exciting to me. It was thrilling. And so after graduation, and during my time at Cornell, I should say, I learned that the hospitality industry is very robust. There's a lot of different facets. And so I started after undergrad at PwC as a consultant. And I was in the hospitality consulting practice. And I was very lucky because during that time, which was 2011 to 2013, hotel development was at a record high. I was on these very prestigious projects, like traveling to do feasibility studies for Marriott and for Four Seasons. And I thought life was awesome, right? I was a consultant traveling, getting paid to travel and do feasibility studies. So like, how likely would a new development be able to happen in some of these regions? And so I loved my time as a consultant. From that point on, after a few years there, I was recruited on behalf of a very well-known hotel operator and developer named Bob Alter to move to Southern California across the country and lead hotel development for a small but growing private equity firm called Seaview Investors in Southern California. And that was the first time I realized the power of career champions and connections. So Bob Alter, I had met him when I was a student at Cornell. He was an alumni, and he was a visiting adjunct faculty member. And I had hosted a roundtable with him. We had kept in contact, a few months at a time, just on career advice. And he recruited me to come lead efforts on his relatively new venture in Southern California. And so during those 8 to 9 years at Seaview, I built about $1 billion worth of new hotels. So This is ground up development, this is renovations, this is acquisitions of large scale branded and non-branded hotels. So Marriott's and Hilton's and some independent hotels. That was incredible experience. So like during the day, I learned how to, raise equity and raise debt and design a hotel and hire contractors and oversee construction. And these are things I had no experience in doing, of course. But, with the help and guidance of smarter people than me, I was certainly able to do quite a bit there. And I think I would categorize my time at Seaview and in private equity as during the day, I was sort of the suit. And, in the evening or in the later parts of the day, I would be wearing my pink hard hat around the construction sites, building construction teams. And what a great experience I had. So that brought me to about 2019, pre-COVID. And I decided that I wanted to go back and get my MBA. I'd always loved school. I wanted to get my MBA. So I decided that, I was going to go to Berkeley Haas, which is an incredible business school. And I wanted to pivot to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial, going back to sort of my roots in the wrapping paper business. And so I enrolled at Haas, and that's where I met my business partner, my current business partner, Alex. And during my time at Haas, I sort of figured out what I really wanted to do was be a CEO, own a business, and go back and be an entrepreneur. And so the way that I decided to do that was Alex and I learned about search funds and raised a search fund, which is essentially raising capital from a group of investors to acquire an operating business. So a business that has been in existence for quite some time. And in 2022, post-graduation, we acquired 11 Software, which is the primary business I run today. And 11 is a software business, a SaaS business, that provides Wi-Fi management software for global hotels and apartments all over the world. So that was in 2022. And then in 2023, just over a year later, we acquired one of 11's largest competitors based in Europe called AirAngel. And so today, 11 as a global business, as a combined entity, is growing. We have employees and customers globally. We service over 25,000 hotel properties and really have experienced tremendous growth in the last 2.5 years. And I'd say all of this, like the best part of it is like I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And that's sort of what excites me on a daily basis.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Hannah. That is quite an incredible journey, and one certainly that you have empowered with great intention. So I'm looking forward to unpacking more of that with some of our questions, which, the first one I'd like to ask you about is whether you've had a personal mantra that has really driven sort of this journey and the intentionality of your choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been like a quote person or a mantra person, but I think the one that I've used for, at least the last 10 years is it always works out in the end. And so if it's not working out, it's not the end. And it seems very simple, but this quote or this mantra has kept me very grounded. Things are usually not perfect, actually never perfect, in fact. Challenges always exist, and I know we're going to talk about some of those, but this type of mantra that this too shall pass, like it will work out, things are supposed to work out this way, allows me to focus on like the bigger picture, the future. Like 10 times out of 10, if I look back, it does work out the way it should have worked out, and like that type of reminder helps. I think this mantra about it always working out and like kind of be patient, it will work out, speaks also to one of my strengths, which is my optimism. I think that CEOs are paid to be optimistic. Like I think that's one of our core competencies is you have to be optimistic and carry that certainty that things will work out. Of course, there's a balance with realism there, but like I need to be optimistic so that my team is optimistic, so that our company is optimistic, and some of that kind of lies within the mantra of it always is going to work out at the end.
I think that's a beautiful thought for all of us because I do think it's true, Hannah. And I think sometimes we overthink and worry about things that are beyond our control. So I think just sometimes seeding that we don't know what we don't know and things will work out allows us to continue to power through some of those challenging situations. So thank you for sharing that. I know you have shared that you've had at least one very significant mentor in your career, but I'm wondering if you can talk about career champions and how that really shaped your career and drove you to the kind of success that you found today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been so fortunate to have incredible mentors and allies in my life, both male and female, which I think is incredible. Bob Alter, who I mentioned, right, gave me a chance by hiring me at a young age in a career that I had no experience in, right? He saw something in me and he was my safety net for a while, like coached me, taught me, gave me tough love, all the things that you need to be able to develop into sort of your own professional. And that was incredible for me. And Bob has been instrumental, still is in my life. Another one that really speaks to me is my favorite professor at Haas is someone by the name of Mara O'Neill. She's a serial entrepreneur. She has founded 4 businesses. She's a human rights advocate. She's the former chief innovation officer for the White House. Like, she's an all-around badass, right? And I bonded with her so quickly, and she's still a mentor of mine today. We speak often, and from her, I've learned things such as, ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things, which helps me drive and motivate my own team at 11. And so every time I speak with her, she gives me some type of advice or feedback that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's someone who came to me in a scholastic sense at Berkeley, but has really helped me in my business and personal life also. And I think that when I think about mentors and allies, one of the most fulfilling parts of my job today is actually being a mentor and champion for others. And that's been a kind of full circle moment for me, particularly in women who are seeking to be entrepreneurs. For me, my goal is, as much as I'm so busy and I travel and I have all these kind of conflicting demands in my life, the more I can give back, the better the future women are going to be when they come up the ranks to want to be an entrepreneur. And so, for example, every Friday I hold office hours for MBA students who are looking to raise a search fund, looking to be a CEO. And I usually do, in the afternoon on Fridays. And that's great. I learn a lot about myself during those office hours, but I also use it as a time to be open and vulnerable and sort of share some of the trials and tribulations of being a CEO that investors may not tell you, the books may not tell you. So I enjoy giving back as much as I have relied on my own allies and mentors in my career.
Well, thank you for sharing just how important some of the people have been in your life. There's a couple things that you have said, Hannah, that I really loved hearing. One was the tough love story, because I do think often we need someone to tell us things that we need to hear that are not easy to hear. And I just think you noting how important that was to your career development is something we can all learn. I also just think your commitment to others and paying it forward, even though you are fairly early in your career journey, but that to me is incredibly inspiring. And I think the way you think about that as part of your learning journey about your self-awareness, but also just what you learn from others, that humility is what I see is one of those quintessential qualities that many are looking for in leaders today. So I think it really speaks to just what an incredible leader you are. So thank you for sharing those elements with us.
Yeah.
I'd like to move on a little bit about risk taking, because in an entrepreneurial mindset, obviously that's core to your DNA. But I'm wondering if you could tell a little bit more about how you really assessed risks, what kind of significant risks you've taken, and really how it drove your growth in terms of your personal and professional journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that to be where I am today, you have to take some risks. Most of them are pretty calculated, but if you're not a risk taker, probably not the path to pursue, to be quite honest. For me, one of the risks that I can identify in my career journey was actually deciding to go back and pursue my MBA. And going back to get the MBA wasn't the risk. Like that was a pretty easy decision. You're going to have a great prestigious degree, like you're going to be able to use it. But the reason I went back was the risk. For me, I knew I wanted to be a CEO. I wanted to own my own business, but I didn't know how, when, what, why. And usually I am a very calculated person. It was unlike me to not have a plan. Like I just knew that I wanted to get my MBA. I was going to learn something new and I wanted to do something different in my career. So I trusted that during the time I would figure out what was next. That's something that is, for me was a personal risk, because I had a fulfilling, incredible career in private equity. I was making good money. I was being able to work on awesome projects. Like I was leading large teams, and I was giving it all away to start something new. So launching that search fund for me meant giving up a fulfilling career, job stability, things like that. But in that moment, I asked myself, and I often ask myself this question actually, is what's the worst thing that could happen? And when I asked myself that question in that moment, it was, well, I would have an MBA degree, doesn't seem so bad. And I would have new experiences. And at the end of the day, I would be able to go back and still be successful in my old career. So like, why not take the chance? And so for me, that was a personal risk, right? A personal decision. I'm gonna do this. And the outcome of that decision was exactly what I needed in my life. And I didn't realize I needed it at the time. But if I reflect back, that was just over 5 years ago. This is the best job I've ever had. Like, my life and all different components of my life, which I know we're going to get into, are significantly better than they were 5 years ago. And I do think that, our work and our life and our personal endeavors are not mutually exclusive. I think they're all completely tied together. And so for me, that was a personal risk. And in the business sense, what I try to do as the CEO is we have to take some risks. And I actually encourage risk taking from all of my leaders and all of my employees in some capacity. But I make sure at the end of the day, when I'm hopefully inspiring my team to make decisions and potentially take some risks, I am the only one in the business that could make a company changing decision that puts the company in a potential hard situation. Everyone else, they can make risks, and we will make mistakes. We will learn from the mistakes. But I do like embracing that, I think failure is doing the same thing wrong more than once. And so, like, if we're going to do something wrong, we're going to learn and move forward. So I'm like pretty risk tolerant when it comes to making incremental risks in our business.
Well, I also want to thank you for sharing sort of that big personal risk that you took, because I do think when you decide that you're going to leave a very successful career to pivot and reinvest in yourself, and then take another new business opportunity. And building a business obviously has very different kinds of decisioning around it, because you don't necessarily have the stability of a salary and, working within an established ecosystem. But what I do really appreciate, Hannah, is about how you measured that risk, how you really assessed what was right for you personally, because I do think that's really important for us all to be self-aware about what is truly important to us, so that we can actually build not only our success, but our happiness. And I think that really comes down to a lot of that intentionality of weighing and assessing what's really, truly important to us. So thank you for sharing that. I know you talked about how you give back to entrepreneurs that are beginning their journey. I also know that you're incredibly active in the industry and in YPO, AHLA, the HT&G Global Technology Group. I'm wondering if you can share with us about how this volunteer service in the industry has enhanced and shaped your career journey as well.
Absolutely. I think I realized that I am the best version of myself and my most authentic self when I am engaged and involved in various elements of my life, not just work, not just my family, not just my friends, but really my community also. And for me, community means different things to different people. For me, community is very important. And so my own view is that in these types of organizations, the more you give, the more you get. That's my own philosophy. And so, if you volunteer and you create meaningful connections, you're going to receive also benefits from those connections, right? It's a really give and take relationship. And so when I joined YPO about 1.5 years ago, which is Young Presidents Organization, it really has changed my life. And I mean that, truly. I found a group of people in that organization that are similar to me, that understand some of the challenges of being the leader of an organization. I've been able to build my sort of own personal board of directors by being around like-minded people that have same kind of personal and professional dreams and aspirations. And like, my takeaway from that is, you don't have to be in YPO, but if you could think about creating your own personal board or personal group, whatever stage in your career you may be, try to develop that group. And that group can be disparate from different parts of the industry or different parts of your life. But for me, it's been very rewarding to be able to contribute to a group and receive from a group on a more intimate, personal level when we come together as human beings. And another way that I think networks drive success have certainly driven success for me is an industry-specific application. So I've been in the hospitality industry, as I mentioned, my whole career. Hospitality industry is a very tight-knit, very industry-focused, networking-first type environment. And so, for example, I am now one of the co-chairs of the vendor subcommittee within the T100, which is a group of technology leaders. And my goal in my role as that co-chair is to take 50 CEOs of large and prominent organizations that cater to the hospitality industry, so vendors, and get 50 CEOs in a room to collaborate and drive outcomes that make the industry better and make our companies better. And that's not an easy thing to do with 50 people who are usually like being in charge. And so I think that I've made stronger connections because of it. I've built my personal brand because of it. And I hope that I've given back to others in the way that we are lifting each other up in the industry or in a personal network. And so for me, it's been very rewarding and very fulfilling. And it allows me to be better in the other elements of my life because my community is important to me.
Well, I share your passion for community, Hannah, because I fundamentally believe it's the learning journey that it affords us, being with others that are in sort of a similar chapter of their lives, and the way that you can think together about how you might navigate certain challenges that come up. But I also agree with you. It's a humanity of the connection, that the relationship equity that you build with others, it fuels your spirit, it fuels your soul, and it fuels your learning. So it is incredibly powerful in terms of shaping you as an individual, and I think powering your success. So I thank you for being so articulate and sharing about how this investment has really continued to pay major dividends for you. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about adversity now, because certainly I am certain that you have faced some in your journey. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that, how you addressed it, how it shaped you, and really what you learned through overcoming some of those situations.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think that in many business endeavors, there's a lot of challenge. In entrepreneurship, there's certainly lots of challenges. I could argue it's one full challenge, right? I think for me, one memorable challenge was when I was fundraising before I launched the search fund, before we acquired 11. We were in the last stages of fundraising. So we had received commitments from a bunch of the larger investors, and we were sort of wrapping up, trying to close out the fundraising. And one of the investor groups that I really, really wanted to participate, we had bonded, we had a close relationship. Like, I felt really excited about bringing that investor on. I thought they could support the vision. They seemed to provide a lot of value. They declined to invest. And I took it very personally at the time. And I said, rejection never feels good, particularly from someone you like and you trust, but, we will move on. And I think I was a bit humbled in the moment, which isn't a bad thing, but I was certainly humbled. And I remember turning to Alex and saying, he's going to regret this choice. Just watch, he's going to regret this choice. But rather than being bitter about it, I was pretty proactive, and I sent this investor, I still send this investor, by the way, quarterly updates about the business. Every time we're at an industry event or an entrepreneur conference, I always make sure to say hello, grab a cup of coffee. I've taken the high road throughout the process. And I believe taking the high road is, 9 times out of 10, the best path to take. So almost 3 years later, our business is thriving. 11 is growing really significantly. And each time I see this investor, he smiles, he gives me a pat on the back, and he says, yeah, I made a mistake. I should have not passed on you. And it's just, again, I don't need the certainty, or I don't need the pat on the back, but I do believe sometimes having that chip on your shoulder allows you to sort of drive and be motivated. And I think my key takeaway is, in that moment, I was angry. I was upset. How could this investor not invest in us? Looking back at it, well, it allowed me to deal with adversity, find other investors, humble myself a little bit. And I've established a great relationship with this group. And in the future, who knows what the future will hold? We're going to be, growing our business for many years to come. There's an opportunity to work with this group in the future. And I do think that back to my mantra, everything happens, it works out in the end. Well, it's certainly working out. And so in that moment, it wasn't the end.
Well, again, a very important lesson that you've shared with the audience, Hannah. And, there's a couple things that I think is really salient to the message that you're sending. One is about that relationship equity in terms of it being part of a lifelong investment. And I've always been a big proponent of Stephen Covey with relationships are like bank accounts. You make deposits and withdrawals. Hopefully you're never overdrawn. But I do think that level of investment that you've made in that relationship, and then just being so successful and determined in terms of driving your business forward, I think it's an amazing story, because you have not only shown him, but you've also really balanced in terms of honoring the relationship equity. So I think that's really important. I also think just the lesson that you shared in terms of that emotional maturity of being able to take rejection and say, what can I learn from this experience, as opposed to letting your emotions control you. So I just think those are amazing leadership lessons that you're sharing with our audience. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about work-life balance. I know that you have had some major changes in your life personally very recently. A CEO and an entrepreneur have incredible demands in their work. So can you share with the audience about how you find your own way of balancing work and life?
Absolutely. And so maybe an unpopular opinion, but I don't subscribe to the concept of like the work-life balance as a concept generally. I think in me personally, it implies that they're mutually exclusive. In many cases, my case included, they're really not. What I do subscribe to, and I'm really, really an advocate of, is creating an operating system. We all should have our own operating systems that is unique to each of us. It allows us to be our best self in various areas of our life. And each of our lives have different components. When we are focused on work, when we are focused on family or friends or by ourselves, like those pieces of our lives are all tied together. And so for me personally, over the last 2.5 years as being a CEO of 11, I have put in place a very prescriptive operating system for myself. And that's one that it wasn't that way in the beginning, right? I've tested and tried and I change it often, but I'll give you a few examples. And, for example, for me, sleep is very important. I'm very busy. I travel a lot. So I'm in bed every night at 8:30 p.m. Like that's my time to go to bed. I'm sleeping by 9. I'm up at 4 a.m. That works for me. It allows me to get my international calls done. It allows me to sleep. And so that works for Hannah. That's not going to work for everyone. I'm someone who, for me to be my best self, I need to be active in the morning. So 5 a.m. is when I work out most days of the week. So that's an example. Another example that I think is maybe relatable to others is I live and die by my calendar. And that's not just making sure the calendar is up to date and it's color coded and things like that, but I actually use it as a prioritization tool. So I'm focusing on the right things. So for example, things like family events or date nights or things, whether you have children, you have to go to a children's school activity. Those are things for me that I actually schedule first in my calendar because those are foundational and are meaningful and are required to have a joyful life. So even though you may have high demand meetings and business travel, those types of rocks, actually for me, I plant them first on my calendar. And so that's also something that I've put in place to kind of allow those types of big, important non-work events or non-work items to be really prioritized in my own life. I also, for me, I travel a lot and travel is tough, right? I think creating an operating system that allows you to function at home is one thing, function on the road is another thing. I have the same suitcase. I have the pre-packed toiletry bag. I have outfits that are easily interchangeable. Like I get rid of decision fatigue as much as possible when I'm trying to travel. And like maybe sounds quirky, it sounds small, but for me, it allows me to spend time at home doing things that are more meaningful. And so, some of this may sound strict, but again, it allows me to maximize my time in the parts of my life that matter. And I think for me, one growth area that I'm working on is how to be even more present during times where I'm with my husband or I'm with my family. And that's maybe during meals or family times. Is the phone doesn't have to be right next to you at all times. And those types of things are what I'm personally working on. So I think that The operating system is the method that I go for, and I've created my own. It's not perfect. It's certainly working. And I encourage everyone to figure out and test out things that work for you and put together a structure and try out what may work to allow you to be better in different parts of your life.
Well, those are some powerful ideas. I've learned a few things myself. I share a lot of your decision fatigue, and I travel similarly to you, Hannah. So I have a very relatable system in terms of how I travel as well. But I do think that prioritization of the things that give you joy personally and making them a foundational part of your calendar, that is really powerful for people to think about, because I think myself, that's one of those things as women, as we often are serving others, that we often trade off what we need personally. And I do think that balance, particularly their commitment to sleep and your joy moments, or more than moments, I guess. I think putting that first is an amazing statement of courage and something we can all learn from you.
One more piece there, like one humbling advice that I received when we're all busy, we have all these, kind of a lot of priorities, is that the humbling advice that I got was, it is unfair to blame my job for my poor performance at home. Let me say that again. It is unfair to blame my job for my poor performance at home. And whether that's a spouse or kids or taking care of parents, whatever that looks like, they deserve your best also, not just your company. And for me, that was humbling, right? That was a bit like, okay, like what rules and procedures can I put in place to make sure that I am showing up in the other areas of my life, right, my non-work areas, as the best Hannah for those people around me. Mm-hmm. And I think that ties into how we show up in work and in non-work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is an amazing way to think about how we give to others that are really important to us, and we don't give them less than sometimes what work demands from us. So thank you for that. I'm wondering if we can move on and just speak a little bit about your public speaking skills. Hannah, you're extraordinarily articulate, and I would love for you to share with the audience about how do you prepare yourself so that you deliver so effectively in terms of speaking opportunities?
Yeah, and it doesn't come automatic, I will say. A few kind of pieces of advice or kind of what I've used to leverage my ability to speak over the years is, the first one is like volunteer. Like maybe it's a panel on a topic you're familiar with, surrounded by other people also speaking. But my philosophy is you do need pattern recognition to start feeling more comfortable. And so get started small, right? I think it's sometimes daunting to think you're waiting to be asked by the perfect event or a prestigious organization. Like, start small, volunteer to speak on something that may be lower stakes or something that is, on a smaller stage. So that's the first piece. The second one is prepare. Like, I do not subscribe to winging it. I think it shows every time if you're not prepared. Me personally, I need to prepare in order to do my best job at speaking to whatever type of engagement that I'm speaking at. The next thing I think is really important is copy somebody you admire. Like, there's no pride of authorship here, whether it be on YouTube or industry professionals or even some politicians that speak very well. Like, see what they do and maybe take some tips from them. I've certainly seen some incredible speakers, and I always think about, wow, they seem calm. Their voice is pretty steady. Like, they're not fidgeting. Like, all these things that I've noticed, like, I've also tried to incorporate just by watching other people. And I think that there's also opportunities to either take a course. I know many CEOs actually take improv classes to get better at speaking in situations that they may not be comfortable with. At Berkeley, at Haas, we have a required course during our first term that's called Leadership Communications. And it was the most embarrassing yet fulfilling class I've ever taken. It was a term, and every single class you had to act, chant, sing, recite, give speeches. The goal was to make us as uncomfortable as possible so that we are comfortable with being uncomfortable. And a lot of those courses exist outside of an MBA program. Like Master Class has them. You can probably sign up at the local community college for some type of classes, but it certainly puts you on the spot. And, if to this day, if someone asks me to give an improv speech, I can do it because I learned some of the skills professionally, to do it.
Well, again, I want to thank you for sharing the very specific component of how you really have honed your communication skills, Hannah, because certainly it is one of the top skills that represents good leaders today. And I do think the fact of that you invest the time to prepare, I think it's, again, that intentionality that you demonstrate in terms of what outcome you want to drive towards. And I do think just the practical advice that you've offered in terms of choosing lower stakes opportunities to really build your skills in that space, because I'm a big believer in that 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell established many, many years ago. But I do think that practice really does hone people's capabilities. And I do think the way that you have shared your journey is, again, something that we can all learn from you. We're coming up to the end of our interview, Hannah, now, and I'm just wondering, as we think about the tagline of its personal stories in terms of empowering personal success, if there's any piece of final advice you'd like to share with our audience today.
Great. Well, I think that if I were just to share kind of one thing, I think we're all very unique humans, right? And I've mentioned a few times during this interview about showing up as your best self or your most authentic self. And I think if we each focus on what that means to us personally, it goes a long way. One thing I do, and I would maybe invite those other people to do that also, is I think of 3 words that describe me at my best self. I'm going to share them with you. For me, that's authentic, optimistic, and curious. So when I am those 3 things, I am really doing well personally. So what I would suggest is use those 3 words to check in on yourself. They could be your own 3 words, pick your own. Are you doing those 3 things? If yes, great. If you're not showing up those 3 ways, why not? What is the stressor that's in the way? What's missing? Like, don't focus on other people, like just yourself. Like, what do you need to change to get to that state that you've just identified as your best self? And so it's not easy. It's actually really hard. Hard things are hard for a reason, but just focusing on what makes you your best self or most authentic self or favorite self is what's helped me, and it still helps me today. So I would just suggest that to empower personal success, we need to show up as the way we want to show up as our version of ourselves.
Well, that's an incredible closing piece of wisdom, Hannah. I do love the analogy of showing up as your favorite self, and for us all identifying what makes us that favorite person. So I just would like to express my gratitude to you for offering us so much, offering our audience so much wisdom. I want to congratulate you for the amazing leader that you are, and what a remarkable role model you are for all of us. So thank you so much for being part of our segment today, and for imparting so much to our audience.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So if I may, for our audience, I would like to thank you for joining us today. And I hope that if you've enjoyed this interview, that you'll visit us on our website, deiadvisors.org, where you'll see webcasts and podcasts from other industry leaders that will empower your knowledge and fuel your spirit. So we hope to see you there. Thank you again, Hannah.
Thanks so much.